Okay, we are live.
Good evening, everyone. It is 7:02 on June 8th, 2020, and we're commencing this regular meeting of the Silverton Board of Trustees. Roll call, please, Kelly.
Trustee Varela?
Here.
Trustee Harper?
Here.
Trustee Weigert?
Here.
Trustee Bierma?
Here.
Trustee Lashley?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Here.
Mayor Furman?
Here. Administrator Ryder, would you like to lead the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, sir. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mayor, you're muted.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. So we've gotten a request from Lisa Branner to move item 8A to between numbers 3 and 4 so that Jamil Curry, who's on this meeting, will not need to wait too long this evening in order to present the Kendal Mountain Run special event application. Does anyone have an issue with that change to the agenda? Great. Any other staff or board revisions to this agenda? Very
No,
good.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, great, very good. So now we will open this meeting up to public comment. I'll be timing, and may I remind everyone that public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who's participating in this Zoom meeting, if you could please click the raise hand button on your screen in order to request comment.
I'd like to also chime in, Mayor Furman, and remind our audience members, if you have called in by phone, we have new functionality. You can dial *9 and that will raise your hand. We'll be able to see that in the webinar, and we'll be able to call on you the same way those who are participating in the webinar with video.
Thank you, Lisa. So we have one person requesting comment, Samantha Wright. You should be able to speak now. You just need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi, I'm actually Molly Wright. I'm Samantha Wright's daughter, and my address is 1872 Highway 110. And I am speaking about the proposed mask ordinance for Silverton. And I understand that there's been a lot of public opposition to the ordinance, but I think that we should look at a few facts. To begin with, we know that wearing a mask does a lot to help slow the spread of COVID-19. Silverton is vulnerable and isolated, with many residents in the high-risk category. Our local economy is largely dependent on tourism, which means we have many people coming in from many different places, potentially picking up the virus and bringing it into Silverton. Because we have so many people coming in and out of town, it is more important than ever that we do everything we can to protect our vulnerable town from an outbreak. Now, everything I have just said is a fact, and we also know that enforcing an ordinance would be the most effective way to ensure that as many people as possible are wearing masks. If Silverton experiences an outbreak of coronavirus, it would be devastating, and we would possibly have to shut down again and close off to outside visitors. And this would be far more devastating to local businesses than the small amount of customers that could potentially be lost if an ordinance is enforced. All politics aside, this is a crucial time to be protecting the health of our town. Making an ordinance is the most responsible way to manage the pandemic locally and to protect the common good. My personal opinion is that there are no valid downsides to an ordinance. I see it as something that is responsible and necessary. I am 17 years old. I work at a local business and I live with a family member who is at very high risk. I know that my family would be a lot safer if an ordinance was enforced. Now, at the last meeting, someone spoke to their concerns about having their younger employees enforce the ordinance. And as a teenager who works at a local store, I can confidently say that I would have absolutely no issue with this. Why? Because I know that it's how we can keep people safe right now. And to the people who are against the proposed ordinance, I ask that you think beyond business and profit. Think about the whole town. Think about how much we are putting at risk if we choose to do nothing. Wearing a mask is something that everybody can and should do. For example, in Durango, there's an ordinance and they've been seeing very good results with likely 100% compliance. And allowing people to come into our businesses without masks is a major risk that could have potentially devastating consequences. However, if everyone must wear a mask, then we know that everyone will be that much more protected. This being said, I see no valid reason for us not to use an ordinance. Think about the big picture and think about the common good. I strongly urge that we make masks mandatory in Silverton. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you very much. The next comment I see is, or hand up, is David Breed. David, you have the floor.
Hi there. I think this is a very serious issue, the pandemic. However, we have had one case in town where a female reported in and was tested and went home and was cured. We've had nobody hospitalized. We've had 0 deaths. This is not to diminish the fact that there's a global pandemic, but from a realistic standpoint, if what we've done is quashed it, it's worked really well. And I think with the incoming tourists, sure, we should take precautions at the market and with public contact places, but we're not. It seems disproportionate to be trying to have everybody wear masks outside when we have not had a hospitalized case or anything more significant than that. And I don't wish for more, but it certainly seems like a realistic approach would be to protect the people that are working at businesses and to open up business, to be open.
Thank you very much. The next hand raised I see is Albert Hyrick. Albert, you have the floor. Looks like he just disappeared. There we go. Albert, you have the floor now.
As I got disconnected. I don't really have a public opinion on this, but privately here at the Alma House, we're requiring masks. I just ask that the trustees look at the health of the community and not at the marketing or the hype or the bullying. It's really important that you all are looking out for all of us and not being pressured by 1 or 2 very loud vocal people. I totally respect and trust your decision in this, but I want it to be made based on facts, science, Becky and Jim's input, and not just on some folks that don't believe this is as bad as it might be. My guests, when they come in, they're required to wear a mask. They're disinfected if they're from out of town, but it doesn't really do us a lot of good to do all of this if a business down the road is not following all the guidelines and doing everything they can to keep this community safe. I don't think an ordinance is the proper way to go. I think the marketing for this town has taken a huge hit. from online and actually locals who have hurt us badly. But there needs to be something done to make sure. I take Betty to the market and I watch the people walk in. Every local I see has a mask on. I see the cars come right down the highway, pull in. They're not thinking about that. So I'm not sure what the answer is. I'm just urging the trustees to base your decision on what's best for our community in the long run and not what's politically appealing right now. And that's really all I have to say. I just want you guys to make the decision based on the health of the people in this town and not just on tourism dollars, because we don't know what the future holds. And I just want you all to be wise about it. And I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next hand raised I see is Tom Davis. Tom, you have the floor.
Hey, okay, sorry about that. This is actually Lisa Davis at Rocky Mountain Phone Cakes. And I just wanted to voice how I see it, but I mean, so I have elderly parents that are compromised and they are staying at home. But that doesn't mean the whole world has to stay at home. I think people are responsible to take care of themselves. And in our shop, we've noticed almost all the people are wearing masks on their own. So I don't really think there needs to be an ordinance for it. And that's just my input. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next hand raised I see is Bill Walco. Bill, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. I would like to change the topic for a moment on another agenda item tonight regarding the proposed one-way route on Green and Blair. Last week in the special session, there was some discussion, recommendation by callers to consider an actual traffic study before actions were taken. And I just wanted to make a couple of comments on that suggestion. I'm not opposed to traffic study, but I'm concerned about the cost and the time frame considering the issues that we're facing without a train. I felt that we might actually, if we decide to do a traffic study, if that's deemed appropriate, we might actually get a better study as a result if they're studying not a proposed idea, but an idea that's been put in operation, where they can actually see what's taking place on a temporary basis. So we may actually get some better data as a result of that, if in fact a study is deemed appropriate. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. At this time, I do not see any other hands raised. So with that being the case, we will close public comment for this portion of the meeting, and we will move on to proclamations and presentations, for which we have the OEM team update.
Sorry, Mayor.
Yes.
I'm not sure how to do this. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I had a comment from Vicky today, and she doesn't have the technology to be able to join our meeting, and she did want to make a comment. Should I share that for her now or later when
Yes.
we discuss Green Street?
Please share it now as part of the public comment portion.
Okay, sorry, Kelly. So here's a public comment from Vicky. And I'm sorry, I actually don't know her last name. She lives at the end of Blair Street, and she wanted to voice her opinion that she would not like to have one-way traffic going down Blair Street, that it would contribute additional and excessive traffic there, create dust, be an invasion of personal space for the residents who live there, and could potentially be just confusing and create some enforcement challenges.
Thank you. And with that, we will close public comment and we will move on to the OEM team presentation.
All right, great. Thanks everyone for having me tonight. It's Jim Donovan, Emergency Manager for San Juan County. I think Deanne may be in the audience, but it's just me tonight. Becky is actually out of town, so I will be pretty brief tonight. Last week it was pretty comprehensive, but just wanted to give everyone an idea on just the situation and then go over just some updates. First thing I wanted to show you is just the 3-day average of COVID cases in Colorado. And this is a moving average. And the important thing to look at and see is just how the trend is going down. So we're about where we were in March 26th. So this is really good, good information. And we can see this more on a statewide level. I'll just show you here. And still the majority of cases are clustered up kind of in agricultural and where there's more of the agricultural industry in Colorado. So northern Colorado. The southwest part of the state has been doing really well. So we have not seen a big surge in cases either to the south of us or to the north of us. So that is, things are trending really well. And with that trend, we have been, I'll actually just jump to businesses just to kind of highlight that. So statewide, more businesses have been opening up. We've had restaurants open up at 50% capacity. Outdoor recreation in a guided capacity has been able to start back up with rafting, ATVs, Jeep industry, and retail and short-term rentals. So last week was a big week for a lot of pieces to open up. I'm going to talk about variances a little bit later, but I just wanted to give you all a picture on that. And today we went ahead and just issued a public health advisory on masks. So that has been distributed both via email and social media. And this is really a kind of our first step. We've been seeing really good cooperation. We were able to measure mask usage at the visitor center. And what we got was 78% of people were wearing masks based on 7 days and 487 visitors. And the number, excuse me, that we're looking for based on the epidemiological model that the state has done through University of Colorado School of Public Health is 80%. That is what we want to really keep the keep that percentage at to get the best outcome. So we're really close, and that's actually without a lot of, I mean, we've been doing a lot of public education, but we will be doing a lot more just specifically on mask usage and really getting people to do that. So we do feel like more of kind of the carrot approach as opposed to the stick is working at this point, but just know that if we don't see it working, we can always go to the public health order. So we are really just trying to emphasize that culture of cooperation and getting that community involvement. We really do feel like people in Silverton have been doing a really good job with it, but it does require educating our visitors. I'm sure you'll have questions on that. I'll just kind of leave that there and then address testing. So we're up to 101 persons that we've tested in town. We still have 0 on the viral, which is really the kind of the gold standard for determining if we have a active case. And then serological, that is the antibody testing. I'm not going to talk about those numbers because we're still interpreting those. It's actually really, it's pretty complicated to interpret those. So we're still kind of getting a lot of expert advice on that information. I know a lot of people have gotten their antibody tests, and Austin had asked about it last week, but we want to just kind of hold off and kind of get a big chunk of data and then present the information. We're still only at 1 recorded case for San Juan County. And then just to put that all in context, the first US case was documented as January 19th in the state of Washington. And then the first Colorado case was March 5th, and that was in Summit County. Just kind of jumping around to some other pieces. We did get a letter of support for the Durango train, and that variance is being put through by La Plata County. We were completely in support of what the train produced. It produced a 140-page plan to manage the entire situation. Is very comprehensive, and really they took our input and was really excellent. If the train decides to leave from Silverton, San Juan County will have to submit a variance. We're going to just kind of wait and see how that process is going with our neighbors down south, and then determine if it's needed for us to do. Let's see, other pieces are, we're working with different events to help them develop plans. I think Jamil Curry is going to be on here a little later to present what Aravaipa Running is doing. We're in support of that. There may need to be some modifications, but we do feel like with the modifications that we can start getting a little more activity happening in town. And then I want to emphasize just the important work that the food bank and basically our social safety net team has been really doing. It's about 30 plus families that have been consistently being provided basically added food and rent assistance, both through town resources, through school resources, and private donations. And just another shout out to trustees Jim Harper and Molly Barella for continuing to do just awesome work with that. And I know John Ryder went out with the team at least one day, and it's just truly shows the heart of Silverton with the work that they're doing. So I just wanted to highlight that. And really with that, if there's questions about the advisory or further questions about the ordinance, I can take public questions from the trustees, but that's end of the report for tonight. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Jim. Trustees, any questions for Jim? Trustee Birma?
This is kind of just going back to the mask issue. From a lot of the public comment and emails I received, it seems that there's, I guess just in what the OEM's opinion and the health department opinion of when would be a good or necessary time of when I should be wearing my mask versus do I need to wear my mask all the time? you know, because you don't really need to be wearing it when you're driving your car versus like walking into a business. And just, I think some clarity on, you know, when's appropriate and when is a time I don't need to wear a mask.
Yep, that's a great question, Jordan. Really, if you are going indoors, is basically the time that you need to wear a mask. If you're outdoors and social distancing, it's still, there's some judgment involved, but if you're social distancing enough, you don't really have to wear a mask. I just think about it as inside is where there are real concerns about basically getting infected. So that's really where you want to watch out. So if you're working in a business and interfacing with the public, working in a restaurant, those were already required. You know, it really is for your personal protection. Great.
Thank you. Any other trustee questions for Jim? Any public questions from anyone participating as an attendee in this meeting for the OEM team or Jim Donovan? Please raise your hand now. I do not see any. So with that, Jim, thank you so much.
That's a good sign.
So.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I just, Resident Gilbert Archuleta had written a letter with his opinion on an ordinance versus not. His opinion was not to go with an ordinance, but rather an advisory. I just wanted to make sure the board had seen that letter and will take it under advisement in their decision making. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Well, thank you, Jim. And with that, we will skip to number 8A based on the revised agenda. With respect to consideration to approve the Kendal Mountain Run special event application. Jamil, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, board, for having me today. Hopefully you guys had a chance to look. If not, been working with Jim to submit an operating plan for its Kendal Mountain Run, but also the Silverton Alpine Runs, which does the Alpine Loop. And so, we just wanted to solicit feedback from the board, concerns. You know, we only want to bring this event to town if the town wants it and feels comfortable having us. You know, we are going to be bringing in people from outside, but we also we have quite a few mitigation efforts. So, you know, if you're familiar with the Kendal Mountain Run, it normally starts in a giant wave on Main Street, and we're looking to do 10-person wave starts every 5 minutes. And this would take place for Kendal. It would take place one street over on Blair and 12th. And so that gives us time to have people arrive at a staggered time, to spread out. Even in the starting corral, there's going to be 6 feet distance between people, and also give people room to spread out on course while they're out there running. Fortunately, both these events are primarily on dirt roads, so they have a wide area. And then also, you know, if we do get approval for this, we definitely want to communicate any guidance from the town in terms of our marketing efforts of wearing masks, where to do so, and how to visit Silverton in the safest way possible. Do you guys want to hear any more specifics about the plan? Do you have any questions for me about the format? With a 5-minute increments, I guess my other question would be total size. Last year we had 250 in Kendal Mountain Run total, and there was about 150 for Silverton Alpine. So, you know, I know those are above the current standards. This would require a variance, but we are planning to, you know, maintain that 10-person starting wave, which should give people a chance to spread out.
Trustee Barilla.
Do you foresee any pack running after the start goes based on people's ability? Is that going to change the dynamic of how, even though you're starting them in the increments, is that going to change the dynamic at all?
Yeah, so we're planning to start people like the faster runners first, so that there's as little passing as possible on course. For Kendal, it is an out and back road, so there will be people going up and coming back down. We are going to basically have people agree that they're going to maintain that distance on course as well. And we will have, a couple aid stations out there still to monitor that as well. But yeah, people are going to sign an additional agreement. So.
Trustee Brilla.
One more. So I know you get racers from all over, but none of these would be out of country, correct? Just from the United States?
We sometimes do get out of country. I can't imagine that we would. If that is an additional requirement, we can definitely make sure that it's just domestic. I don't even know if you can get here right now.
Yeah, I don't either. So just a question. Thank you.
Trustee Birma.
Yeah, so I've run the Kendal many times and the Silverton Alpine Marathon, and definitely the Alpine Marathon. I have no doubts in the social distancing aspect of that. I guess my two suggestions with the Kendal run is the only place I could foresee a bottleneck is that last 500 feet to the summit, because it does get a little tight in there after aid station number 2. So just, I guess, considering that. And also it's usually during monsoon season. And if we have the slower runners starting at the end of the pack, just making sure the start time's early enough where, if they take the 3 or 4 hours, they're going to be able to get back before, potential thunder and lightning if it's that time of year. Other than that, I'm all for these races going on.
Yeah, and just to address that, we are looking at an up and over course this year for Kendal. So they would go up and over and return down the road on the backside to help mitigate there'd be no out and back on that small trail section. And then we do plan to start much earlier with the start times for that reason for the monsoons.
Lisa, did you have a question?
I just wanted to let the trustees know that Mr. Corey has been working with me as well as Jim Donovan on refining the plan. And this, like any other special event application, will need to go through all of the standard approvals: sheriff, OEM, the ambulance, public works director, the trustees, and we're layering in that additional COVID-19 safety plan. So what we'd be looking for tonight is a conditional approval from the board that all of the other requirements are met and all of the other approvals are obtained.
Thank you for that clarification.
Mr. Mayor, if I may quickly, I'd just like to compliment Jamil and his group on the plan so far and the fact that they're taking all this COVID very seriously. They're kind of setting the standard, in my opinion, as to how these events will be shaped and approved. And just a nod to you, Jamil, and your group for taking it seriously and going through the channels and setting a standard here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Trustee Lashley.
Thank you, Mayor Furman. I'd like to make a motion to approve the conditional approval of the Kendal Mountain Run, a special event application.
Second.
Roll call, please, Kelly.
Trustee Barilla.
Yes.
Trustee Harper.
Yes.
Trustee Wager.
Yes.
Trustee Birma.
Yes.
Trustee Lashley.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Jamil. Please keep us posted with the progress. And I think unless there's anything else, that's it for this item tonight.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right. So moving back into the normal agenda item number 4, approval of consent agenda items. Any comments or notes with respect to payroll, accounts payable, or the meeting minutes from the past 2 meetings? In that case, do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, Kelly, please. Thank you.
Trustee Barilla,
Yes.
Trustee Harper,
Yes.
Trustee Wiggert,
Yes.
Trustee Bierma,
Yes.
Trustee Lashley,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney,
Yes.
Mayor Furman.
Yes. Administrator Ryder, would you like to lead off for staff reports? Trustee Barilla, yes.
Just a quick question to Kelly, because normally we would sign checks during the meeting. When do you need these by? Or did somebody else pick it up?
I have nobody that's signed them yet. If I could do it in the morning, that way I can get them out tomorrow.
Okay, I'm available. How about you? Anybody else?
Jim?
Okay, all right. We'll get that done, Kelly. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Mayor, as far as staff reports, we haven't gotten to the new format yet. We're going to talk about that hopefully briefly toward the end of the meeting. We'll talk about it, but wanted to just have the board briefly discuss to make sure we're planning on going to the new formats for next meeting, and want to briefly touch base just with all the trustees to get a quick feedback on what each would like to see, level of detail. These over time under the prior board had gotten more detailed. We've started to try to scale back to that, what is significant or unique in our 2-week period between meetings, and also listing things that may have the potential to come before the board at a future meeting so that you're being prepped. I don't have anything in here to highlight necessarily. Some of them are still a little longer than we'd like, but we're ready to make that push for the next meeting to have truncated, significant, unique, potentially board approval, board input related items here going forward. So I would entertain any questions, but I don't have anything specific to highlight.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Thank you, Mayor Furman. Thank you, Mr. Ryder, for considering this. So I just wanted to kind of take ownership of any mistakes in this form, because it was really sort of from my perspective of like, not so much like, I don't want any staff members to feel like their work isn't being valued or that it doesn't belong in the staff report necessarily, but just like a sorting technique so that we, can read it sort of consistently. We, whenever we need to come to it, where our eyes can kind of always go to one part of it first if we're running short on time, or to help us prepare efficiently for meetings. And then my second comment about the form is I put a little asterisk where it says like, this is a place where staff can complete their own template. So it's faster for staff, so that like, if I actually practiced using this form with a few of the different staff reports to see if everything that they had put in, if it worked. So it would be a place like where John Seitz would put for ongoing project update, like he doesn't always have to write in that he's working on the new plans for the water, sewer, that's something that's a placeholder for him. If there's something new that kind of comes down the pipe, then he can add to it, but he doesn't always have to say, or a better example might be Mr. McDougall's Great Divide, where, every time he writes a staff report, he has to say like, I've continued to work on the Great Divide. It's just a placeholder where that just lives there. It creates a space for ongoing updates. And if something new happens, like this week, there is something kind of new for that report, maybe it goes in there. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think I know where you are going with your suggestion, Mayor Pro Tem, and I agree with it. And, you know, we can, again, discuss a little further later in the agenda, but I'm all for keeping it at the significant higher level, unique items that are of interest to the board. I will assume, you know, we're all doing our job in our day-to-day routine, and we don't need to spend a lot of time on that in staff reports. But I do want to get the board consensus, because everybody has a slightly different level of interest and, you know, at level of detail, et cetera. And we'll try to mash it together to satisfy everybody the best we can.
Trustee Lashley.
Thank you, Mayor Furman. Yeah, I just want to echo another thing in here about these staff reports too. Is sometimes we're kind of doing double duty as trustee reports and staff reports. Great examples, the Planning Commission. That if we have a detailed staff report from our planner, Lisa Adair, and then we're also getting a trustee report, maybe we're kind of doubling back on things that we don't necessarily need to. So maybe just trying to examine some of those kind of crossovers and figure out where they are most appropriate to be reported.
Trustee Barella.
A lot of times the trustee reports are verbal versus the staff reports, which are for town consumption as well. And that's because it's part of the packet. So there is a big difference in the way one is perceived versus the other. The communication, I think, is excellent in comparison to what we used to receive, with the way that Mr. Ryder has taken over and made these staff reports work. We used to get enormous dissertations. Mr. Lashley and Mr. Wiegert, or sorry, Trustee, I was getting close there. They remember how lengthy and wordy some of those would be. And I think that this has been a much needed improvement already. I would like to actually maybe see it implemented one time with Mayor Pro Tem Barney's potential sheet to see how it's going to work before I really make a decision, because this has been amazing. We can go right to a bullet point right now. I can see what every staff member has really been focused on. It not only it validates everything that we do with our actions, and and then that gives the community the validation there again of what staff takes up and follows with what we propose as a group. So I don't know. I'd like to see the form used once before I truly make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Oh, never mind. I agree with Trustee Barella. I guess I just wanted to say, like, to also let staff kind of try it out and take it for a spin and get their feedback, because it may not be a great fit.
You know, we kind of had a little motto, you know, I love my mottos around the staff regarding staff reports. And it has been, what we need to do is inform and not overwhelm. And so that's what we've tried to gravitate for. And, you know, we get there and then we drift off a little bit and then we get there. I think we just need to discipline ourselves, find your guys' sweet spot in the detail level, and then go with it consistently.
Is it worth having a quick discussion about whether the trustee reports would benefit from being written and included in the packet as well? Or is that not something that this board is interested in considering?
I would only point out, Mayor, that in my tenure, verbally has worked, and we do memorialize the reports in writing in the minutes, just as a consideration.
Great. Trustee Lashley.
Thank you, Mayor Furman. It had crossed my mind in discussing this. I think it could certainly improve the efficiency of our meetings. I think that sometimes some things come up as under trustee reports that aren't necessarily relevant to the board, or maybe should be their own agenda items. So it might be a way to kind of streamline things that we discuss in the meetings and things that end up on the agenda. That being said, sometimes it is beneficial to have small discussions in trustee reports, but I welcome some suggestions from the rest of the board members.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Okay, so I made a form for that too. And I've just been trying it out myself. It seemed a little overbearing to try and get everybody to do it on month 2 of being a trustee. But I've been using it kind of during meetings. So like when I'm in a Kendal meeting, I have the trustee report up and it's a nice kind of note catcher and it keeps me focused on the, what I'll try to want to say to the trustees, and potentially can make that update a little bit more focused, and it just refreshes my memory because, if a meeting was like 3 days ago, I've probably forgotten. So I can share it and then, maybe it's a choice.
I think it might have been included at the end of our packets on the very last page. Is that different than the committee form that you made?
Sorry, nope. I'm sorry. Yeah, it is that's the committee report, and that's what I was referring to.
Thank you. Trustee Burrell?
Since the committee reports are going to be done as meeting minutes, I don't see what the necessity of having an additional layer with a trustee report if you're giving the meeting minutes to begin with. So I don't see why a verbal discussion is still not a valid item.
Trustee Lashley.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd be willing to try it and give it a whirl anyway, just like the staff members are. I don't see any harm in trying it. I'll definitely take your form and try to make my at least my verbal reports a little bit more concise and efficient by using your form. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Thanks, Trustee Lashley. Okay, well, the other thing is, just to clarify, Trustee Barella, I haven't used it to take minutes, just to synthesize the important points of the meeting. So the minutes of the meeting exist in a different document.
So what I'm hearing is we will not be submitting, there's no expectation that we'll be submitting these in writing, but maybe we can use them individually to help organize our thoughts for presentation during the trustee update section. Great. Administrator Ryder, any other notes or highlights from the staff reports or any questions from the trustees about the staff reports this week?
Nothing more for me, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Moving along then to trustee reports. Let's give it a spin. Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Okay, I'll go. Give it a spin. The Kendal Mountain Committee met, and our primary agenda items were to revisit the mission and vision statements to make sure that that resonated for the new members as well, and our timeline and consideration of some COVID delays. We also worked to prioritize the tasks ahead of us as they relate to that timeline. And for trustee consideration, we discussed the possibility of how to potentially complete the trail, how to make some, buff up some Kendal options that are sort of happening over there anyway, without it being a fully involved process through the master plan. And so we just kind of thought about ways we could potentially I don't know if anything's really easy or simple, but look at completing the Kendal Trail as it links to the MSI Trail down on the RNPP land. Potentially looking at a dog park in the area, kind of as you cross the bridge and come into the parking lot to the left along the river over there. Adding some disc golf holes and maybe putting some mountain bike features over in the pump track area, which is in really good condition right now and is getting a lot of use.
Thank you. Any other trustee reports? Okay. In that case, we move along to continued business with the first item, consideration to approve resolution 2020-05 regarding mask wearing. Who would like to kick off this discussion? Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Mayor Furman, can you just give us a quick, this is the consideration of the resolution, correct? This is not a discussion about whether we go with advisory or ordinance, correct?
I suppose we should ask Administrator Ryder for a quick clarification in the agenda. Our item says consideration to approve the resolution. As of the close of our last meeting, we talked about directing the town to prepare some type of recommendation for an advisory from the public health director. And I think we saw something to that effect come from San Juan Basin Health. So I suppose, Administrator Ryder, are you able to frame this discussion a little bit better for us?
Yes, at the last meeting, I believe we were directed, yes, to create a resolution advising the use of masks and encouraging the public health office to issue a similar advisory. They have. Our San Juan Public Health Office has issued such an advisory. This resolution would support that advisory. It is not an ordinance, but rather an advisory with, detailed best practice where masks are encouraged most to be used, some exceptions to that rule. So this would marry the town up to what our local public health office has issued just the other day.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Okay, Mr. Ryder, thank you. That's helpful. And then how do we decide at what time do we revisit? I guess my question is, I would like to think kind of long-term about this decision that we need to make and discussion. And I'm a little unsure about the timing of moving towards an ordinance versus keeping this an advisory, and how we revisit this issue and how do we note when it is time to take a different action?
Well, I sit on both the Oem team or the committee that meets twice a week and is monitoring constantly. I also sit on the recovery team, economic recovery team, as does the mayor, that is monitoring, more of our business recovery aspect of things. So through that involvement, we're in constant evaluation of what is working and what is not. And they're meeting, OEM twice a week, recovery team once a week for the standing future. And we take input from all aspects of the community, including mask wearing, what we're seeing on the ground in individual businesses, on the street, et cetera. So I would ask that you rely on us, that if we see, and certainly Becky and Jim are analyzing all kinds of data, not only locally, but statewide and even nationally, as to how mask wearing is working. Is it affecting the spread? Is it a positive? So all these inputs consolidate into those weekly meetings. And I would ask that the board, allow us to report in. Jim for now and Becky will continue to give a weekly update to the board on the overall OEM process, program, results, success, failures. And that's how I think the board could monitor whether this is working or not. If we see a precipitous fall in mask wearing, we immediately revisit. This resolution can be revoked at any meeting, at any time. And we could move toward an ordinance if we see data and evidence on the ground that an advisory is not strong enough to get the result we want.
Thank you, Mr. Ritter.
I mean, a good barometer so far is the visitor center staff has taken it upon themselves to monitor every person that comes in the door. And as Mr. Donovan reported earlier, we're seeing a 78% success rate at the moment. We'd like to see 80, but we're very close. A lot of it is simply going to be observation and reporting back to us. I have heard, this is not empirical, video data, but the gas station, for instance, has seen a real increase in mask wearing, from maybe below 50% to upwards of 80. And that's a vulnerable point right there, because you've got people coming straight off the highway from out of town, from out of state, that may not share our same respect for mask wearing. But the deployment of the town's masks and business owners taking responsibility, so far so good. And I don't want to speak for Jim, but I think so far we would say advisory and signage and local community taking responsibility and enforcing. Scott Fetchenheimer has reported in the OEM meetings that at his own store, people are walking in without masks, and he's politely just saying, hey, we kind of would like you guys to wear a mask. They're right here. Would you mind grabbing one? And he's got almost 100% compliance. So those are the success stories. Is everybody wearing them? No. There are some people that are never going to wear them. We have to accept that. But by and large, and Jim, please feel free to jump in. I don't want to overstep the gut data, the on the ground data, the observations would suggest that it's working.
Trustee Lashley and then Trustee Harper.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I just want to echo mostly what Administrator Ryder just spoke of, that, the OEM providing those really crucial statistics was really helpful for me earlier. So thank you, Mr. Donovan, very much for that update from the visitor center. The more kind of data that we can get, the more effectively I think we can kind of base our policies and our decisions on. But yeah, I just want to kind of echo what Administrator Ryder just said there.
Trustee Harper.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. Can Jim Donovan speak on the advisory that his office put out today?
Sure.
That may solve a lot of problems.
Yeah, let me see. I can see if I can share it. Well, it's very similar. It's following very similar to the information that is available in the state. Here we go. In the what's available in the state. The big difference is the ordinances. If you read, say, the ordinance from Durango, it's got very formalized language. So an advisory has a lot more flexibility in communication. So, we're just basically saying we strongly advise the public to wear a non-medical face covering. And it's very crucial to reducing the spread, and just give all the details on it. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it is very much what the state is also releasing. So tomorrow we're going to be making, we've got one of our team members, she will be developing a more of a graphical flyer for us, and we'll be releasing that tomorrow. So that usually has more effect than all the words. But some highlights, I think, from previous discussions is the World Health Organization actually did come out Friday and strongly recommended that countries use non-medical face masks to reduce the spread. We just have to remember that it is also just one tool in a set of tools. So it's the face mask, the social distancing, monitoring if you're sick. If you are sick, really isolating yourself from other people.
Jim, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for all you do. Sincerely, thank you.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Trustee Barella.
Just one tool that I've been using as people come into the door. I printed them off the state website, and it actually says, "Stop, are you sick?" And that's the very first thing that people see when they come to my door. Second thing is, once again, I will hold this up. If you haven't received your packet to do it, go get it, download it. This information is all available. Everybody can get this, hang it. All you have to do is just a little polite talking, and I have not had a single issue with anybody wanting to be compliant. So offering the mask, some people say, "Oh my God, I forgot mine," or they're about to get it out of their pocket. They drop it on the ground. You offer them a clean one. There has not been an issue. I did have a group of people, kind of a funny story, and they were from Kansas, and apparently this was never a thing in their entire state. They really didn't have lockdowns. They had absolutely nothing, and they were floored that this was something going on because it was never a thing in their state. So dealing with that was just really simple. You smile at them, you say, "Yes, this is what we have to do. This is what we're doing to be compliant, to be open." And they were more than happy for a family of 4 to grab some masks and go sit at a table. It's not hard.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and I'm really glad that Mr. Ryder was able to have the materials available to pass out to businesses. I think consistency in signage, graphics, being able to visually cue into what an individual needs to do when they arrive in an indoor space, and then be set up for success in that indoor space. The way you're saying, Trustee Burrell, I've seen your signage, and it's really easy to see, and it's really obvious, and it's easy to read, and it's really graphic. And I think, I just want to reiterate that the more masks, yeah, I'm all about the 80%, like what gets us to the 80%. And I think we all have our anecdotal experiences, and sometimes I am around town and I have a really positive experience and I see a lot of mask usage, and I'm at the grocery store and that's just a really easy setup, or I'm at the post office. I've seen so many masks at the post office. Sounds like the visitor center is a good place to collect some data. I just, I guess I want us to consider when, I don't want to be short-sighted about this decision. And I think that, being really attentive to what's happening around us sort of ahead of the game is the key to this, because we have a lot of people who come and go from Silverton, and they're, I don't have great tourism data, but I know a lot of our visitors come from places where there isn't necessarily a culture of mask wearing. And so to just make sure that they know what to do when they get here, and that they comply with our advisory, and that we have a system in place to address this before it's too late. Because I think what Molly Wright said in her statement was really well articulated and well reasoned and well thought out. And it's the long game. And I think that's a hard thing because we've been in it for so long that we have a bit of virus fatigue. And I know I have some decision-making fatigue around the virus, but I know that wishing and hoping that it's going to go away is not a medical solution to a global pandemic. So I would just I really want to state that I want to not just see the negatives and not, only notice the people who aren't wearing masks. I want to notice the people who are wearing masks, but I don't want to get behind it so that in July and August, when the economy does have a chance to really take off and be humming, that we have to shut things down. That sounds like a disastrous situation economically, medically, and socially to me.
Thank you. Trustee Bierma and then Trustee Wiegert.
So just want to first say thank you to everyone who's made public comment about this or sent emails and, talked to me about this, because it's definitely the thing I've heard the most from people about, and definitely just being an advocate for youth participation in civics. Thank you, Miss Wright for making a comment, and really well thought out comment. On that note, I'm right there with Sally. Like, I think, hitting that 80% is the goal, and whatever we can do to hit that goal, I'm all for. And I think I'm definitely kind of in the minority of, I think we should be ahead of the, try and stay ahead of the curve on this, because it's something that if we need to implement, I feel like it'll have to happen. It'll have to be a quick reaction if we do have a reaction. So just keeping the ability to open and revisit this often, and I applaud the people at the visitor center keeping track of data. The data trumps any anecdote any of you will provide. For me, at least, anecdotes are great, but data is better. Yes, that's kind of where I stand on that, and I'd love to hear from everybody else.
Thank you. Trustee Wiegert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do believe that we've heard from everybody on this topic, and I think this resolution is quite well written. It has everything that we heard from the public last week during the public comment. I believe our staff has done a good job with this resolution, and I'd like to make a motion, if I may, that we approve resolution 2020-05. A resolution of the Board of Trustees of Silverton, Colorado, advising the public to wear face coverings while visiting public businesses and when safe social distancing cannot be maintained in public.
Trustee Lashley.
Thank you, Mayor Furman. I support going forward with this resolution. I just want to kind of follow up what Sally was saying. I do think it's important that we revisit these protocols and maybe set aside a little portion of our meeting after the OEM updates to kind of more specifically give an honest reflection of how do we think we're doing. Do we think that anything's changed for the positive or the negative? And then I did want to bring up one other point too, that really well thought out letter from Mr. William Dodge came through too, where he was talking about kind of the examples that we set and some of the large user groups that we have. And I wanted to maybe not just request that this is going to kind of fall on your shoulders, Trustee Harper here, but just when we do start getting the train rolling again, kind of an update for what the train thinks as their protocols. I'm not asking you to make that, Trustee Harper, but if a representative from the train could give us a kind of an update before the train starts running again, similar to how the running protocols that they had for the event, that would be probably wonderful to hear from the train.
Well, Trustee Lashley, I want to comment on that. I believe that Jim Donovan spoke on that earlier. And I think that the railroad has demonstrated in the event on Thursday what we're willing to do, what we want to do, and how to keep the citizens, friends, neighbors of Silverton, San Juan County safe. And I think that, again, Jim Donovan could touch more on that.
Thank you.
I suppose I need to raise my hand in order to ask questions too, so people know that I have them. But the question that I had for Jim Donovan is just whether you had an opportunity to read the draft of this particular ordinance, and if you thought the language sufficiently matched the types of guidance that are being provided from the Public Health Department, and if you had any comments, edits, or questions on this ordinance draft.
Thanks, Mayor Furman. I actually have not seen the resolution, and based on what I've heard, though, it complements, what the public health advisory is stating. So I'm comfortable with it. I mean, honestly, I think it really just needs to say that the town of Silverton supports the county public health advisory.
Thank you. Trustee Brown.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. I'd like to second it.
Kelly, roll call, please.
Trustee Barella?
Yes.
Trustee Harper?
Yes.
Trustee Wiegert?
Yes.
Trustee Bierma?
Yes.
Trustee Lashley?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Barney?
Yes.
Mayor Furman?
Yes. Well, thank you very much for that discussion. Moving along now to discussion of the restaurant, outdoor patio, and alcohol service. Anthony, is this something you'd like to preface with any type of comment, or should we just jump right in? Or Administrator Ryder?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to just update the board. We've had numerous discussions in detail about what this might look like, what we can do within the current state public health ordinance that's supported by our local public health office. And I think the goal ultimately was to take this new public health office order from the state and see what we could do locally on the ground to support our restaurant businesses in particular. They're only allowed 50% seating inside at the time and maximum of 50 people. What the new part that was introduced officially last week was that outdoor premises for both food service and alcohol service is now permitted. So what the town staff, with input from Anthony Edwards, sheriff, and others, fire department, is to first offer the option to all of our restaurants, if you would like, and the guidelines for these are in the board package, because there are strings attached as to how this will operate. These guidelines mirror what the state has issued as guidelines with some local adjustment, but offer outside premises in our right-of-way specific to parking spaces that would front, from left to right, or for the width of a frontage of a restaurant building. Town would provide the barricades. If the restaurant opted in for this expanded premises, there would be a temporary permit issued by town with these guidelines attached. That needs to be developed by Attorney Kosnick, of course, if the board decides to proceed tonight with this plan. So first step is, do you want to expand your premises outdoors per the public health order by the state? Town, with board approval, would offer that. You would attain a temporary permit. We are not going to charge a fee for that permit. That would establish, we would bring barricades for the local business that opted in, establish the new premises, and food can be served out there officially. They can put their own tables out there. Sidewalks are not to be obstructed. Any kind of extension cords or lighting would have to follow guidelines to not create trip hazards. So we've gotten to that level of detail. The second layer to that the state is now allowing is you can serve alcohol in these premises. So with that, if businesses wanted to opt in for alcohol service, it would be served only, meaning that a patron couldn't go from the outside premises into the bar, order a beer and come back out with it. They would have to be served at their table. For that, the local business would apply to the state for a modification to their premises. That's a $150 fee that the state is charging for that. They're promising a quick turnaround for that modified license. And that would allow the local restaurant to serve alcohol out in the established premises within the barricade. Town also would have to issue, and this is where I'll let Anthony speak to the process, but town also would issue its local liquor license modification. Again, no fee, in a nod to helping local businesses not get burdened with that kind of financial situation. I know it's small, but every little bit helps these days. So with those two steps, they would then be able to serve alcohol in the defined premises. And that's where we'd like to stop for right now and see how that works. There are some options to expand those offerings. We don't think it's prudent at this time. I believe we don't want to speak for Sheriff. If he wants to chime in on any of this, I'd like to invite him to do so, Lisa Branner. But we think that's a good starting point, and it solves a couple of issues and creates a couple of opportunities. Number one, it'll offer expanded seating to compensate for the limited seating they can now have indoors. It'll create an interesting, unique, vibrant streetscape. It'll allow patrons to sit outside and observe and look at some of our retail stores adjacent to these restaurants and hopefully get excited to buy something. And that coupled with the one-way Green Street discussion we'll have, we think we'll have as a first solid step, a really positive impact on restaurant patronage, streetscape excitement, circulation on green, and then that coupled with the one-way green plan to push people over to Blair, really create an interesting opportunity here. That will it be perfect? Probably not. Will it be good? We think so. Will it open the door for possible other adjustments to expand these type of offerings? If everything's going well and people are responsible about it and following the rules, you bet. So we'd like to give it a try, and we're seeking board guidance, to proceed. Again, there'll be certainly legalities in the form of resolution and or ordinance modifications that will have to be officially approved by the board, and we would be prepared to present those at the next meeting should the board approve us to continue on this path.
Trustee Brill.
Hey, so just a discussion point. Under no circumstances may this encroach into the sidewalk's walkway. On regular years, people put out the benches and then the little outdoor tables. So are we saying that those now need to be moved in, people's benches and anything in the walkway? I guess I need a clarification of that statement, please.
Well, as I understand it, the benches and any little tables on the sidewalk was probably in violation of current ordinance and just wasn't enforced. So we'd prefer, to keep sidewalks as clear as possible, just for traffic flow. And we're also going to now have servers going back and forth across the sidewalks at the restaurant locations. So in an effort, to create even flow here, we would prefer that ordinance be respected and that sidewalks are not, unduly encumbered with benches and tables. Tables and added seating on sidewalks is going to be prohibited in this case. Now, if there's, I don't know, Pickle Barrel, he may have his benches bolted to the sidewalk, and are we going to make him remove them? Probably not. But
can I ask for a clarification? Are you talking about benches and chairs where there's an extended premises, or are you talking about all together?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Anthony. I mean, we're talking about premises that would start at the curb and go out to the edge of parking and side to side the width of the premises.
I'm going to
Those
talk
are the
about
new premises we are strongly advocating that we do not put tables, chairs, etc. on the sidewalk.
Administrator Ryder, let me clarify my question. XYZ is a retail shop. They aren't extending their premises and they have a bench out in front. Are we going to be asking them to remove that bench?
If it's historically been allowed, no.
Trustee Barilla.
So that does clarify some of the questions I had. Because people do like to congregate on either side of me on benches. And so like next to Scott's, so that's what I was trying to make sure, because people will get carry out food and it will appear to be an extension of my doorway, but they might be, or funnel cake doorway, but all they're doing is using a bench on the sidewalk, which then technically does encroach the right of way and they're eating a to-go food. So I just wanted to make that very clear. Thank you.
And I will, let me caveat all this, but I need to talk to Inspector McDougall about this as to why the ordinance, it reads pretty clearly that those things aren't allowed, but they have historically not been enforced. And we're not going to change history here, at least here temporarily. So I'm gonna, with a caveat, say those things will still be allowed.
So I have a quick question about the amount of space permitted for each restaurant. It sounded like it would be up to the width of the actual storefront.
Yes.
So if it's a wider building, they have more spots. If it's a narrower building, fewer spots. Has there been a quick count, if every restaurant opts into this, how many parking spots on Green would go away?
No, we haven't done that calculation, Mr. Mayor, and we could.
The concerns that I've been hearing about this all relate to the impact this will have in the residential parts of town in terms of increased parking around town and other tourist traffic where there isn't normally tourist traffic. And I'm not making that statement as a for or against, just hearing what I've been hearing.
Yes, good question. I mean, if I was to hazard a guess, you'd probably be looking at, on average, maybe 4 parking spots per restaurant. Restaurant owners, Trustee Barilla, Trustee Lashley, is that a fair statement? Probably an average 4.
I think more like 3, but yeah, 3. If we really wanted to get into a 25-foot restaurant, it's like 3.5.
And I guess one other quick question with the interplay between this discussion and the Green Street one-way. If the Green Street one-way went into effect, all of the parking spots on the west side of Green would be blocked off anyway. Is that correct?
No, they would still be available, Mayor Furman.
Okay.
With the exception, of course, of what would be barricaded, extended premises.
Trustee Brown.
So once again, I guess I have a concern, just to make sure that everybody who wants to opt into this gets a fair shake in this. How do we foresee some of this happening on Blair Street, where we have a massive curb height issue, and we also have setbacks on some of the buildings? They're not quite the way Green Street is. I just want to make sure that they all get to take advantage of it in the same way. What are you're going to say the same kind of restrictions for their sidewalks as well, even though their sidewalks are this big in comparison to Green Street? And what do we foresee any other additional issues that could come up with the fact that they're not paved in correlation to where we are on Green Street? I mean, are we going to make some sandbags around the, excuse me, I lost my train of thought, around the barricades to make sure that we don't have like flooding issues in their perimeters? How are we going to make sure that they get treated properly with this?
Yeah, and to tag along to that, I think some businesses also have railings in front of them, and so access to an area like that would also require anyone going into the building to need to go through that access.
Yeah, admittedly, some of these will have to be handled on a case-by-case basis to make, and if it's to the extent we'd have to come to the board for some kind of variance because it's so different than what we intended. Trustee Barella, as far as, owners will be responsible for their own tables and chairs. If we're having a monsoon, yes, it's a little easier to deal with the drainage on Green Street, but the barricades won't be hurt by, drainage and heavy flow. It'll be the owner's responsibility to get their tables out of there and in if they feel like they're in danger of being damaged. As far as some of the differential elevation and railings, we'll need to investigate some of those, literally on a case-by-case basis to consider those variables. I don't have the answers and how we can make it work, but if there's something deviating from the overall goal of the plan, we would be back to the board to discuss it.
Another quick question I have is, I saw that the railings are first come, first serve. Do we have a rough number of how many railings we have and whether those are expected to be sufficient, or if not, I guess what percentage of restaurants might we be able to satisfy the request for? And then
I would ask that Todd Bove be allowed to weigh in on that. I think if every single restaurant in town, and I will let Todd correct me if I'm wrong, utilized our barricades, we may not have enough, and that's why we put the provision in the guidance. But I'll ask Todd to speak on that if he can.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't have an exact count on barricades. They are there's a pretty significant amount. I'm not sure if Lisa Browner recalls how many were donated, but I could certainly get a count tomorrow. I do think we'll be able to accommodate a significant amount of businesses. And that language was specifically put in there where you'd have to consult with code enforcement to just make sure that if we could not provide barricades, that a suitable solution was found.
Thank you. Trustee Lashley.
Thank you, Mayor. My question, I guess, or questions kind of specifically are more directed towards Anthony here and the letter that he sent us regarding kind of these two bullet points. The first states 2 or more on-premise liquor licenses operating in accordance with Public Health Order 20-28 Safer at Home as amended to obtain temporary approval from state and local licensing authorities to modify their premises to include a communal outdoor dining area that is within 1,000 feet of each of their licensed premises. And then the third bullet point, maybe we'll go one at a time here since that was long enough. Is that kind of like a shared premises between two liquor license operators? Is that kind of what that's stating there from the executive order?
Yeah, Trustee Lashley, that's what's being allowed by the state. We'll have to change. I think we'll have to change an ordinance, and there's a couple things we might have to change, but not to get into the logistics of that right now. The state is allowing 2 or more holders to extend their premises. The way that would work logistically one would extend their premises, and then the other or others would come in together. They would pay their fee. I believe it's $150. That's my when I talked to Kelly earlier. I don't know if she's on right now, but I believe that's the fee. And then they could share a common area. Is that right, Kelly? 150?
Yes, they would each have to pay the 150, but only one of the establishments would have to fill out the application.
Okay, thank you, Judge Edwards. And then the third bullet point talks about the suspension of enforcement of the statutory limitation contained in CRS 44-3-901 1ID 7. Wow, that's a lot. The prohibiting public consumption of alcoholic beverages on any public right of way. And then is that so that suspension of that ordinance? I know normally one thing is that you need to have a barricade or a separation around it. Does that suspension of that require that barricades be there in order to have this kind of consumption areas or extended premise?
I'm gonna answer that a different way, and I'm gonna see if I understand you correctly, Trustee Lashley. One of the issues historically inside of the state of Colorado has been you either drink in the premises, or with the recent order by the governor, you can take something to go and drink somewhere else where it's legal. That third bullet point, which you just discussed, allows you to walk out of a premises with alcohol to an area.
Okay.
Through a right of way. For example, if I'll just use the Golden Block, for example. If the Golden Block had a public area, if we had a public area or they had a premises, the alcohol could be carried out of the premises to through the right of way to another area premises, or an area that we designated as being allowed for open consumption.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that clarification.
And so, by example, the town under the state revisions here could offer something like Columbine Park is one of these designated common areas. Staff is just not recommending at that time. It creates a layer of enforcement challenges. It creates another layer of confusion, what is allowed, what is not allowed. So for what it's worth, at this time, staff's not recommending establishing one of those areas. But we could consider it, in the future, or if the board desires, we could pursue that as well at this time. But that's not staff's recommendation at this time.
Thank you. Trustee Burrell.
Okay, so I have the liquor licensing authority. Anybody who has a liquor license can sign up to get these from the LED. And this came out on Friday, and it does actually state public consumption in order to allow for a more flexible and anyway. So it covers exactly what you were asking about, Austin, and Anthony has already obviously read this and put it into the context for this. But I want to make sure that we're stating that because it becomes an extension of your restaurant, we would no longer have to put on the little to-go sticker and cover up and seal something, because we were actually serving it to them in that space as if they were in our space. So it eliminates that to-go cup LED sticker that has to go on there right now for anything to walk out the door currently. Is that correct, Mr. Edwards?
Trustee Barella, we could do it that way. And I would agree with about the sticker. The complication is that we need to know as staff whether or not the desire is to allow people to walk out of the premises across the sidewalk into the extended premises and be legal, because that's a separate change in our laws. So there's two things. One, yes, if that's extension of your premises, you can serve people outside, and there doesn't have to be a sticker. However, if people are going to come in and out, there needs to be a separate change, and that's not difficult. We just need to know what the desire is of the board.
Trustee Burrell.
I thought I read in here that it had to basically be your weight.
You just muted.
Did it go yet?
There you go.
Okay.
I can hear you again. Go ahead.
Okay. So I thought I had read that it had to be the wait staff.
You muted again.
You're muted.
I don't know why this keeps happening.
So I think, Trustee Barella, what you're asking is, you thought that it had to be the wait staff to bring there. And if we keep the rules like they are, just extend our premises and say that we're going to allow public consumption in the right of way, right outside for an extension of premises, that would be wait staff. We also have the ability. I don't want to get us too lost in the weeds here. I mean, we could go all night, right? But we could also, when we make changes to make the premises available to extend in the right of way, we could make the ability for people to come in and out with drinks in that premises, which would be right there in front of the businesses. It's been discussed. I'm not weighing in on whether we can do that or not. I'm just letting you know what is available. My understanding from staff, and we've all talked, we spent a lot of time was spent by a lot of different people. Sheriff Conrad, Kelly, John Ryder, other staff, Todd, and I'm missing somebody, Lisa. We all discussed this last week. And in the end, what happened was the idea was that we would do a premises extension into the right of way. There would be no public consumption on the sidewalks, and that that would be the recommendation. Now that's that consensus recommendation at this point. And that would require wait staff to go in and out. So that's correct, Trustee Barella.
And I guess for the board to consider, we're trying to start this in an understandable, easy to monitor first step. If we layer in to-go cups and certain right away you can drink in, and we have common consumption areas, and you got to have a sticker, you got to have a cup that's sealed, nobody's going to understand it, and nobody's going to be able to enforce it. So the idea here as a first step is to keep it really well defined, easy to understand, not only for business owners and staff, but also for the patrons. And then we can always layer in, as we get used to something or it looks like it's working, we can always layer in some additional options at our choice. But the idea was to start, kind of definable and easy to monitor, easy to execute as a first step.
Trustee Lash.
Thank you, Mayor Furman. I just want to say thank you guys to the town staff for putting this in front of us. And I think you guys have done a really extraordinary job in turning this around relatively quickly here to give us kind of the ins and outs of these changes that are really on a moving target. I guess to Judge Edwards' question as to whether we would like to allow patrons to kind of go in and out with alcoholic beverages, I can tell you my patrons certainly would like that, but I think that it really would be it would behoove us at this point to hear from Sheriff Conrad and hear from his thoughts if he has any at this time, if he's available to comment to us.
I am. Thank you, Trustee. Yeah, I'm fully behind any of these thoughts that are going to help get our businesses into some sense of normality this year. I think that this is an unusual situation and a time where we should be thinking outside of the box and doing anything we can to help our business community along. My initial thought was actually to try and make this even more streamlined, and rather than have the businesses have to pay for anything, which I think is unfortunate. I think we've landed on that through our advice from Lisa Maestas, the Colorado alcohol expert. But my initial thought was for us to just try and suspend the open container ordinance for the business pedestrian zone for a temporary period of time, and therefore not have to charge the businesses with anything or make them have to jump through any hoops. I unfortunately was too short notice on the conversation we had with Lisa Maestas, and not sure why that wasn't the appropriate course, but I believe she gave us some reasons that were making that impossible at this time. So I'm just here to back up anything we can do to try and get these businesses having some sense of normality this year and not be so strict about what goes on with alcohol. We'll deal with it. We'll deal with the enforcement of it however we need to, is my take on it.
Thank you, Sheriff Conrad. Trustee Barella?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess for enforcement issues, by actually making it your wait staff, having them take the drinks out and then, you know, them doing the work, coming back and forth, it actually does put that extra layer of added protection for anyone, because, well, at least with my staff, they've all taken the alcohol training class, so they know what to look for over serving, everything like that. So it puts it in a different perspective, where if we're letting them walk in and out and actually walking up to a bar area to purchase it themselves and then carrying it back out, you don't actually have that extra layer necessarily of enforcement from your staff, keeping an eye on everything that's happening. So I kind of like the direction that Judge Edwards already took this to, but I want to make another thing very clear, at least it seems that way to me, that they didn't actually suspend the to-go cups. So we have two different issues there. So people technically can still call me or any restaurant and say, I would also like, with my food order, I'd like, you know, a white wine, and you put it in the to-go cup with the sticker. And then once they leave your premises and they hit the sidewalk, once that sticker's on there, they really shouldn't be allowed to then sit into the other section, because you're reserving that for customers that you're serving with staff. They should be leaving the area. So I can understand how that could be a little bit of a nightmare for Sheriff Conrad, because we are still allowed to do that, but we're not making a public consumption area with this whole section. So that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, it seems likely that there'll be a number of kind of foot-fault issues with this. You know, I'm picturing a monsoon coming in, or a dust cloud rolling through, and someone grabbing their drink and running inside, and not waiting for wait staff to pick that up and carry it across the public right of way. I'd definitely like to learn more about just having the BP district be open container permitted, at least to understand what makes that impossible, if there are issues there. But I think that would be worth learning more about. And then the other question I had for Administrator Ryder is, are there any significant costs associated with doing any version of this, other than the staff time to administer the applications and then to distribute the barriers?
Nope. Staff time related to those two items would be the most significant, Mayor Furman.
Thank you. Any other questions at this time, or move on to our next topic? Mayor Pro Tem Barney.
My question may relate to our next topic, but does this extension of premises depend on Green Street going one way, or does it work with Green Street in either direction?
It works either way, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you.
Administrator Ryder and Mayor Furman, can I want to weigh in something. I know we aren't going to talk about tonight. I mean, we're getting long in the tooth here, but I want to just bring up one point. I think there's some ways that the business pedestrian area could be open for consumption, but there's some complications in the sense of people bringing in their own alcohol and how we manage that. And that's not what we were really trying to, that wasn't the purpose of what we were trying to do. So it's still in the back of our minds, particularly after the governor's order. But I believe this is probably, based upon talking to the state, the best resolution in the short term right now, as Administrator Ryder had already alluded to.
Thank you. Trustee Uyghur.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to commend staff right now. I think this is a really excellent plan. You know, this is something that I personally asked for a long time ago, back in April. I thought this would be a great idea if we could get some restaurants to allow people to eat on Green Street, and staff's done a great job trying to make this happen. So I'd just like to say I'm happy supporting this, and I'd like to see this move forward.
Thank you, Trustee Uyghur.
Great. Administrator Ryder, do you need any further direction from the board?
No, I think I'm hearing clearly pursue the option as outlined and start to put the legality documents, the legal documents in place for board consideration approval at the next meeting.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Sheriff Conrad. Thank you, Todd, for weighing in earlier. Trustee Lashley.
I just wanted to also extend that question to Judge Edwards and see if there's any other additional clarification that he feels that we maybe haven't reached as a board.
No, I think we know what we need to do in the immediate term, and I please share your thoughts with staff. And when I say that, please, if you have an idea or you have a question, please include Sheriff Conrad, Mr. Bove, Ms. Branner, and Ms. Branner and Ms. Fries. So just include us, and we'll try to keep facilitating what we're doing. We know we want to try to get where we want to be sooner rather than later. But I feel pretty comfortable what everybody's where you're directing us to go. I think everybody does.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Great job, staff.
All right. Well, thank you. We'll now move to the discussion of the temporary conversion of Green Street to one-way.
And the map has been somewhat refined. I think more importantly, the main change to what we've considered, the signage plan has been a little more defined, and that is in Director Seitz's write-up. Physically speaking, the main change from this go around from last is that we considered further, I questioned kind of why we were making Blair Street one way, and after a discussion with the staff, there wasn't really a good reason. So the current plan keeps Blair Street as a two-way street. And you can read in the plan notes, we've got a bit more detail on the signage. The cost of the plan still stays at about $5,000. That is a rough estimate. Director Seitz advises me that, he could be 3 weeks to a month out ordering, getting delivered, installing all that signage. So this will not happen overnight, even with board approval to move forward with this plan. It's gonna be an experiment. Let's, mark our word. We do not believe at this time engaging a traffic engineer and taking on that cost, not only cost, but timing. By the time, an engineer would come up, I think it was mentioned here, we do an RFP, we do, select a contractor, get them under contract, get their work started. Timing would not be ideal and would probably leave us minimal time to actually implement this. And at this point, we just don't think, the one-way street on 4 city blocks is warranted. We have expertise on this staff in Director Seitz. Myself I have experience down at Purgatory with, street flow and changing traffic patterns. We don't consider this major and significant, but it will require monitoring from the get-go. We've talked to Sheriff Conrad about it and addressed, issues that we've heard. We will try to address it the best we can through signage, but it will take upfront some very close scrutiny. Is it working? Do we need to make adjustments on the fly? We can, ultimately, a scenario is it's just not working, in which case we'll retract and go back to two-way and call it an experiment, learn a lesson, see if we can improve on it in a future season if we want to, but we think it'll work. And we don't think it creates a terrible, any kind of significant at all safety issue. And it could really, be of great benefit to Blair Street at the end of the day. That's really the primary driver here. We're creating a different, unique kind of draw your attention to Green Street and that it will be one way. We've got now outdoor seating, we've got a really kind of a vibrant streetscape, and we're driving business to Blair. So we really strongly feel it's worth a shot. All involved, including the Sheriff's Department, who would be most closely monitoring would like to give it a try. And so with the addition or the change of keeping Blair Street two-way, because there was really no reason we could see to make it just one way, and refining, and we will continue to refine street plan or signage plans, et cetera. We would recommend to the board that they, consider us going forward with this. I do want to make sure that everybody got a public comment on this issue from Mr. Andrew Charnock, who is a VRB owner at 146 East 14th. He did express some significant concern about the noise level, dust level, et cetera, that may impact his property. And I promised him that I would make sure that confirm with the board that they did receive his email and consider his comments.
Trustee Nicola, and then Trustee Lashley.
I guess one of my true concerns is that we're saying that this is very temporary. I've had people come to me and been like, no, this is not a good idea. They've tried to turn us into a walking area before. We need the traffic flow. We need this. We need that. So I just want to make sure that we have an end game to this. If it does work for the COVID, that it's not something that will be always implemented. That's just concerns of people who have reached out to me. And the other item is, so if we're going to continue, it's so kind of hard to do this. I guess you can all just look at my hands and point. So if Blair is going to continue to be two-way, all of the side streets then would still be 100% usable for both, for one direction if you're coming off of Green. Does that make sense?
Yeah, all side streets will be available to Green and Blair. On Green, you just don't have a southbound lane that you could turn right into westbound side streets. But going northbound, you would have both west and east side streets available.
Okay, and then my next question in reference to this is, since the fire station is at the north end and so is the ambulance, what would they have to do if they had to come down Green Street? So is that, I really didn't see that part of a consideration in the plan. So
yeah, the fire department would have the loading zone.
Okay, and the ambulance, all right.
Yeah, so they have a center lane that's still clear that is designated loading zone, but that would be their southbound lane.
Okay, would that mean that we're moving the planters out of the direct center of that lane then?
Yes, that is in the plan. They're moving over into the southbound lane.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Trustee Lashley.
Thank you, Mayor. Being a resident of Blair Street and a former business owner on Blair Street, I feel like I've got some good perspective on this one. It's something that probably for 30 years has been talked about in this town. And if there ever was a year to try it, this is certainly the year. That being said, there's, I think, a lot of potential issues and problems with this, and especially with the associated costs of signage and enforcement and all that. I'm not sure that I'm 100% in support of this. The biggest problem that I have, I think, with this is the train. If the train runs, then Blair Street is a disaster. Living on 14th Street or in the 1300 block, and then having a business on the 1000 block. I have frequently resorted to driving down Reese Street to get 3 blocks. And I think that what we're doing here would be the same thing. We're basically making Green Street one way so that you can go down Reese Street or Blair Street. And even if we put signage on Blair Street, I think we'll be driving a lot of traffic down Reese Street as well, which I don't know that the residents there will be very in support of. The dust is certainly an issue, even in the summertime, just with the increased OHV traffic and legalizing OHVs. I mean, it's once an hour that you need to go outside and wipe down tables on a patio in the summertime from the dust and dirt, unless it rains in the afternoon. And then that case, then everybody just tracks mud in instead. But I think visitors have a strong aversion to, not all visitors, but some visitors that we have a strong aversion to driving on unpaved streets, especially motorcycles, street-oriented motorcycles. So I don't know how our visitors are going to perceive having this this change kind of forced upon them. Will they'll be required to maybe drive down a muddy or dusty street? And then the one other issue that I don't know that we've thought about or considered, or at least I haven't heard of it yet, is Green Street's also a state highway, and I don't know if there's any kind of modification or talk that we have to examine with CDOT, because I know that there are certain requirements that we have had to have in the past regarding lighting and some other sidewalks, other things on Green Street as well. So I think that if this is the year to try it, if there's a year to try it, it's this year. But I can't say that I'm in complete support of it for those reasons.
Great points, Trustee Lashley. As far as the highway, it is my understanding Green Street was deeded over to the town by CDOT, and they no longer have jurisdiction. I will confirm that, but that's my understanding.
I can fill in with that if you would, Sheriff Conrad. The state highway still is considered CDOT land up till 6th Street. After 6th Street North, it has been deeded back to the town of Silverton.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Barney, and then Trustee Birma, and then Trustee Harper.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so I'm excited, really sort of, however we decide on the best thing for Silverton here, I am excited about this kind of creative thinking and the ability to be flexible and adapt to something new. And I think that's a good sign that we're considering this as a board. I was curious about what the indicators might be that it's not working. Because I think, like, to some people, it's going to be not working from the get-go. And to some people, you know, it will always be working. So I'm wondering how we'll assess that, or how we'll process that as trustees, to get to what Mr. Ryder said earlier. And then I also wanted to just comment on Trustee Lashley, that I do feel like if ever I don't have a lot of historical context on this issue, so I would need to get that, I think. But it does seem like if ever there's a year, this, or a moment in time, or 2 months or 3 months, that this is likely it.
Thank you. Trustee Birma, and then Trustee Harper, and then I have something too.
Yeah, again, I just kind of want to reiterate what Sally Mayor Pro Tem Barney and Trustee Lashley brought up. You know, if there's every year to think outside the box and experiment with something new, I think now's the time to give it a shot. I guess after the last meeting, I was kind of under the impression that this was tied into the extended premises and open container issues that we were talking about. So I'm just curious of what the perceived benefits of the one-way traffic is for the 4 blocks. You know, if it doesn't matter either way with the extended premises.
The primary reason is to drive business over to Blair Street.
Mm-hmm.
You could make a case that we're creating a more interesting streetscape on Green, something different, something that's been talked about being tried. But I would say the overwhelming, drive here is to drive business over to Blair.
Thank you. Trustee Harper.
Thank you. in reading in the packet, it says there's $5,000 for signs. I don't look at it as $5,000 for signs. I look at it as $5,000 in investing in Blair Street. We have business partners over there. Our friends and neighbors are over there, and we need to help them out. We're all in this together. Let's do something bold. Let's do something different. We need to do it.
I am all in favor of investing in Blair Street, and I like the idea of driving traffic in that direction. I also love the creative thinking in terms of greenways, better pedestrian flow, and things of that nature. I think Austin listed a number of concerns that were beyond those that I had, and further pushed me away from this idea. And I'm also concerned about spending $5,000 on an experiment that wouldn't go into place until the first week of July. It sounds like at best, if not a little bit later. And I'm curious if, to what extent the Blair Street businesses and other property owners have been polled to find out whether they in fact support this as a, or has the Blair Street organization that put together those design plans and the creative district, have they been polled for input? But I think at this time, I would say I'm not in support of the one-way traffic flow on Green.
Yes, to answer that, Mayor Furman, I had a talk extensively with Tommy Whiff today, who brought me a list of businesses on Blair Street that he has talked to, some that are open and some that are waiting for enough traffic to be open. And I'll list them quickly. Again, some of these are already open now, and some of them are prepared to open and are waiting for traffic. So in no particular order: Avon, Shutterbugs, Emporia, Bent Elbow, I can't read that one, the Blacksmith, Shady Lady, Natalia's, Old Arcade, Lookout, Eureka, Mountain Arts, Hummingbird, Villadala, and Colorado Landscaping, to name the ones that Tommy Whiff, who is obviously a prominent businessman on Blair, who's been there forever, all are in support of the one-way street experiment, to try to drive business to Blair. And he believes that some of those in waiting could open quickly if they saw the necessary traffic to make it work. And that was what Mr. Whiff wanted me to pass on to the board.
And you don't have any concern spending $5,000 while we're currently looking at all the ways we can cut our budget?
Again, it's an investment in Blair Street, and no, $5,000 is not a large sum to find even in this trying time. I'd like to think we make it up in sales tax.
Trustee Harper?
I was Ryder just took it out of my mouth. I think if we invest, we make it up in sales tax and in good faith in our town government.
Trustee Brella?
And just to make sure that I do understand the additional amount of traffic, I think everybody does, that potentially Blair Street could get. But what really, truly, what Austin said before, this is probably the best year to try this out. Yeah, everybody's going to have concerns, and if we put an end game to it, and Sheriff Conrad and John Seitz say, hey, Mr. Ryder, I don't think it's moving in the right direction. It's not, what we had planned and foreseen. Then we have an end game and we can remove it. But right now, I want to see my friends and neighbors on Blair Street trying to succeed. I can't even imagine having a mortgage over there right now and being a restaurant owner or being a shop owner. It just kills me to see nobody there right now. You can drive through it and the traffic is non-existent. So if we do get the train in and everything livens up a bit and we don't see it necessary, but I think it's imperative right now because these are other businesses that we need to support regardless of what is happening. They are our community, they are our constituents. So thank you.
And just for board's consideration, staff is, even in a success story, is only proposing this for this year to be evaluated in future years on a, as needed. But for right now, this is not anything permanent. This is for one season. We'll pick a date, October 15th or something, where we return to two-way, but it by no means is this considered a permanent change. Or we wouldn't propose it as such.
John Sight's recommendation is to have a public input period prior to implementation of this plan. Do you have any suggestions on how we should facilitate that?
I would suggest that we create whatever ordinance or resolution that is necessary, put it on the agenda for the next board meeting and have a public input period prior to considering that ordinance and or resolution.
Trustee Uyghur?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For me, this is about building unity amongst our economy and our business community. I think it's apparent that the town is taking steps to help alleviate some of these pains from the pandemic to the businesses on Green Street, working to allow them to operate within the parking spaces. And I think it's only fair that we allocate a little bit of money to our brothers over on Blair Street, notorious Blair Street, non-neglected. They're a part of the community as well. We want to build resiliency. We want people who are going to stay here for years, and we want to make them feel welcomed. I'm all about this.
Trustee Harper?
Thank you. I would also want to add that if additional barricades are needed or wanted over on Blair, I'm sure Ms. Barella, and I know I are willing to donate temporarily our orange barricades to Blair Street.
Administrator Ryder, would you like any further direction?
No, to summarize, I think we will proceed with the plan as presented. We will prepare the necessary legal documents as with the premises discussion. We will make sure that there's a public input, I would say probably for both the premises extension issue and the one-way street green issue. It'll be a slight modification, but that's how I think we allow the public to weigh in before board considers approval of these items.
And should we also follow the other considerations from John Seitz to continue consulting with the town engineer, the town attorney, CIRSA, and the other requests that he made?
Yes.
Any other comments on this topic? Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Since we've already handled 8A, we'll move to 8B, which I believe we've also already handled. Any further comments about the new staff and committee report form, or do we feel like we sufficiently covered that during the staff report section?
From the town administrator's perspective, I believe I've got the necessary guidance to begin revision to our staff reports.
Very good. In that case, we move on to our second public comment period prior to our executive session. If there's anyone that's participating and would like to comment through Zoom, please click the raise your hand button. Since I don't see anyone raising their hand, I'd like to let everyone know that we're going to move into executive session That's going to require the public to leave. You're all welcome to return following the executive session, but the only business that will be covered following the executive session will be the adjourning of the meeting. And at this time, I'd like to ask everyone who's publicly participating to hang up or disconnect from the chat. Some of the technical issues that we seem to have been having were related to member or people participating being kicked out of the meetings for executive session or at the end of a meeting. And then for some reason, Zoom remembers that when they try and log in the next time and that person's identified as a formerly kicked out person. So if everyone can voluntarily leave, that would be great. If anyone's phone is just sitting around and not on, we will all have to exit the meeting and then join back in. But let's give everyone a minute to exit. And if we have that successfully done, we should be good.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the streaming live on YouTube at this point as well, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Looks like we still have 3 attendees.
Hey, I'm going to take a 5-minute break.
Sounds good. Thank you all.